right, welcome Bradenton, Kiwanis. Very excited to be with all of you today. We had a contingent group of us go to the international convention last week. And before we get started with our normal programming today, I want to bring a little bit of that international convention back to you. We had a very inspirational speaker to start off one of our events. His name was Chris Stapleton. He was a victim of a racial crime, and what his main talk was to us was he wanted us to be able to overcome hate with love. And so the best way to overcome hate with love is to start by hugging one another. So I want you to look in the eye of the people around you, give them a hug, and tell them how much you love them. All right, all right. Oh, yeah. All right, thank you so much for participating in that. All right, we're good. All right, guys. Here we go. All right. Don't get carried away with the love, but I love where you're going. So it was an amazing speaker to talk about it because he said he does this at all forms of conferences and everything. The only place he can't do that is at a middle school. Because he said that when I did it at the middle schools and I say, all right, guys, give each other hugs, the boys go, I ain't doing that. Wanted to go ahead and move on. We have exciting additional speaker today. Reggie, are you ready? Come on up. Yeah, we're very excited to be partnering with Reggie. We'll talk about a new high school coming to the area. Come on up.
Hello, everyone. Getting rid of my mouthful there. Sorry about that. It's not a way to introduce myself to Manatee County. First and foremost, we'd just like to, on the behalf of ALS, our program, as well as the Bradenton Bay High School, the name of our high school. We'll be located across the street from the post office. And every time I say that, everybody that is from Manatee say a supply store. Keaton Supply Store. I am going to get that. So now I can say we're in the building of the Keaton Supply Store. And what we're here for, we're Credit Recovery School. That's what we do. Middle and high school, that's 6th grade through 12. However, we serve ages through the age of 22 now. What happens is that some scholars fall through the cracks from traditional schools or whatever. And we're there to help them fulfill their credit hours. We have 2 types of diplomas, as the educators know, Mr. Omar and first and foremost, Ms. Lyons. Please tell Ms. Lyons we really appreciate her support, as well as other leaders in Manatee County to get us here to start off this year. By that being said, yes, if a scholar just fell out the cracks due to some odd reasons, they fall out, getting in trouble, fall in the wrong crowds, and traditional schools are family situations, things of that nature. We now know these days that scholars have to help out families financially and things of that nature. With our school, they have a flexible scheduling, A section and a B section. That's 7 to 12:30, and then 1 to 5:30. And during those times, scholars can come and take their courses, their main courses. We do not have electives. We do not have sports or anything affiliated with the county. But however, what's unique about our school is that some scholar athletes that may not like traditional schools, now we're seeing they're getting into this NIL thing and they can't even go to school no more because they're so popular. Schools like ours come in hand where they can come and fulfill their credits. And they can still participate in Manatee County school sports as well without not going to that traditional school full-time. So I would love for you guys to come down and visit us. I can't promise that we're going to be open on August 12th, But however, Miss Janine, that's been a great support to us as well. Right where you're sitting now is going to be our temporary spot for our scholars. We're going to get it set up for our scholars can have their courses and take their courses up until probably maybe the middle of September. So we're trying to push that as we speak. Once again, I want to take up more time. Kiwanis, I did speak with some people. We're looking to become key members of Kiwanis Club and other clubs as well, Boys and Girls Club, and people that I've spoken to already. I'll be out in the community this week. However, I have another meeting here in about another hour. I don't mean to just eat and leave, but I'm just fortunate and happy that Kiwanis allowed me to come up and speak to the members of the committee and the leaders of the committee. I will say this, what the speaker just said about the rich community. That's why we target this area too as well. We know the rich tradition, not just foundation, not just economically, but the tradition of the school, of the community. And we know what was needed here. And we much appreciate, and we're going to do what we can to make sure that we, as a school, stand by the culture and represent Manatee County to the fullest. And I thank you.
Good day, everyone. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce today the 9th president of New College in its history. We're very blessed to have the really the best liberal arts college in America, arguably, but President Corcoran will get rid of the argument here shortly when he gives us a talk. Under his leadership, New College has enrolled its largest incoming class in school history in the fall of 2023, launching an intercollegiate athletics program. He updated several indoor and outdoor spaces across the campus, introduced the Presidential Honors Scholarship, and expanded opportunities for Pell recipients. Richard previously served 4 terms in the Florida House, culminating in his term as Speaker of the Florida House from 2016 through 2018. In December of 2018, President Corcoran was appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis to serve as Florida's Commissioner of Education. And without any further ado, I'd like to bring up President Corcoran. Thanks for being here. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I was glad for the clarification between Chris Singleton and Chris Stapleton. When they said Chris Stapleton, in my head, I'm like, dang, I got to follow Chris Stapleton? This is insane. This is not going to go well. I'm going to deviate a little bit, because if you guys have questions, I'll be glad to ask questions. But I always say sometimes when you give speeches, it's like Groundhog Day, where you just get up and you give the same New College speech. But I'll answer any questions. I think in this moment, with such an august body and great community leaders, and you just heard from Reggie, I just want to kind of lay out an educational thought, followed by the liberal arts and the value of the liberal arts, which I think is in decline, and then talk a little bit about New College and take questions. If I was to leave, and you remember one thing, as community leaders, in my opinion, we have to get right the philosophy of education. And I think what's happened over the last 50, 60 years, and I'm a conservative Republican, and so I'll confess that much of the movement has been led by Republicans in my own party. So if I was to say at any given forum, what is the purpose? What's the philosophy of education? And 9 out of 10 answers will be to get a good job. And that has been promulgated by 3 or 4 previous Republican governors. It's been promulgated by senators, all in my own party. And I will tell you that is the recipe for demise. It is the beginning of the end, and we're seeing it play itself out. Education is so much more than getting a good job. It's a byproduct of a great education. And a great education teaches you how to think, how to be a great citizen, what it means to wrestle with the great questions of time that are timeless and have been around for generations. What is a just society? What is man's nature? What does it mean to live a good life? Those are all things that are afforded through a great education. Frederick Douglass, he escaped slavery, becomes a very obviously prominent historical figure in American culture and history, and he was asked about education, and he said, education is freedom. And you can get the context of escaping slavery, but education is freedom. But he said it's the uplifting of the human soul to the glorious light of truth. And those are loaded terms. What's, soul, truth? Those are very loaded terms that are now being called into, objective terms that are now being called subjective. And that's the problem of having an education that deviates away from a philosophical search for truth and meaning versus an economic benefit. And so we have to get that right. And that's why one of the famous quotes, you guys have heard it 1,000 times, people name books after, but when Franklin got asked, monarchy or republic, and he said, it's a republic if you can keep it. Because you just cannot keep a self-governing society unless you raise up good citizens. It will not sustain itself. And you see that playing itself out. Which gets me to the next question. So that's the philosophy of education. Where are we going wrong? We're the richest country in the history of mankind. I mean, nothing comes in comparison. We spend more per student than most countries anywhere in the world. We have a PISA test that's just an international test that looks at academic outcomes of high schoolers. And the United States is 28, 27, 35 in math, science, and English. Somewhere in those, we're never near the top. But the reality is, when are we losing children? What is happening? So when I was Commissioner of Education, I said, okay, we've had testing now for almost 25, 30 years. I want to see, i.e., I'm hypothetically saying this, little Richard Corcoran, when he was in 3rd grade and we gave him the first standardized test, and we rate him, 5 is excellent, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you're a 2 or a 1, you are considered either partially, fully, somewhere in that spectrum, illiterate. And we got to move you along. And so I said, okay, well, I want to know how many kids in 3rd grade, i.e., now I can look at names. So let's look at little Richard Corcoran. What did he score on the test in 3rd grade? And then I want to see what he scored on 10th grade. And so they went through all the data. We put it all in, and here's the reality. And this is in the richest country in the world with a massive expenditure. If you were a 1 or a 2 in 3rd grade on your FSA, you immediately got reading interventions, you got tutoring, you got offered all of these different interventions. When you got to 10th grade, did we move that needle, was the question. And the reality is 86% of those kids were still 1s and 2s, despite all the interventions. The reason I say that is because I don't care what you watch in history, nature, whatever, the most dangerous individuals in any society are those without hope. If you have a snake in a corner, whatever you want to do, an injured lion, whatever, those without hope are extremely, extremely dangerous. And what we are doing in this rich country of ours is graduating people, and we're giving them basically no hope at the age of 18, which is why we need credit recovery schools in America. They should be, I love what you're doing, Reggie. I think it's fantastic. It's direly needed, but it should never be needed in a prosperous country that's doing well with their students. Arguably, I think you would agree with that. But now, because we don't have that, we have credit recovery schools doing amazing work with these folks to give them hope. And so I say that because then I looked at the 3rd grade scores and I went back and I said, okay, what's our kindergarten readiness scores? And the reality is we lose children for the most part before they even enter kindergarten. And then we don't recover them ever. And that's just, you hear in presidential debates, what's the greatest threat to America? Is it, Russia's Putin? Nope, it's China. No, it's radical jihadism. The greatest threat to America, hands down, without question, is we are failing miserably in the education of our youth, and we are imploding from within. That's just a fact. And you're seeing it play itself out more and more and more. And so what I say, I've said in the legislature, I've said it to everybody that would listen, is if I was in Vegas right now, I'm not a gaming guy, but if I was in Vegas right now, I would put every single dollar I had in the budget on early education from birth to kindergarten. And I know it's a 20-year process, but I think it's the only way we get there. And by the way, when I say these stats, I want you to understand that we have the NAEP exam in America, the National Assessment. We have our own assessments. Every state under the federal regulations has to have their own exam. We are in overall, the #1 spot. So when I tell you these stats in Florida, we're #1. On the NAEP exam, the average of those kids, it's a little different on how they do it, but are they basically educated adequately? And basically 60% of all students in America are below the average assessment. It's just, and we are, again, Florida is no different. We're in the, so we dipped to 58, whatever. The numbers are very narrow. But that's what we're graduating. That's what we're putting out there into the world and saying, go out there and conquer and go forth and live boldly. And it's just it's an abject lie. And so I just say that as a backdrop. The second thing I want to talk about is just the liberal arts. Now, I'm skipping to higher education, but I'm just telling you, as much as we love getting the money from the state in higher education and the value of higher education in a society is great, it too has suffered from 50 years of wear and tear. You don't even have to be a conservative to know who William F. Buckley was, but William F. Buckley went to Yale. While he was in Yale, at a 25-year-old kid, he graduates and he writes a book called God, Man, and Yale, who basically, it's 170 pages, it's not a long book, but he basically says, this is what my indoctrination was in 1951, whatever it was. 30 years go by, Alan Bloom, a famous academic, writes a book in Search of Excellence, I think in '89, and he's like, what's going on in academia? He's an academic, a liberal academic, and he's talking about the indoctrination that's going on in schools. And here we are in 2023, and it's still a problem. You have, and I can take more in Q&A, but the formulations of things like critical race theory that spun off into DEI are destroying academic freedom. And it's not just me saying that. If you look at Harvard and Professor Gates, he was an African-American who led in the civil rights movement. He goes, wait a second, why are we making part of our critical race theory components the destruction of free speech that helped us bring about the civil rights movement? It's not just, it's a widespread thought process, and I think you're beginning to see that end. But my point in saying that is the liberal arts is game changer. It is the degree. I would bet of all of those people who are college educated in this room, a majority have a liberal arts degree. If you look at some of the greatest minds in the STEM world, I always talk about Steve Jobs at Apple. You know, he said what made him the first $1 trillion market cap company? It's because they lived at that intersection of technology. He goes, all the rest are technology, Oracle, Microsoft, Dell. He goes, we're technology married with the liberal arts. He was educated at Reed College. Didn't finish, but he was educated there. He said that intersection is what makes your heart sing. And that's what made him different. And so I can give you example after example. You know, Martin Luther King learned about passive resistance from being in a liberal arts education and learning about what happened in India. All of it just great moments in history have always been tied back to liberal arts. The people who fill C-suites in the United States of America, the CEOs, overwhelmingly, almost 40% have liberal arts degrees. If you look at the people that fill the seats in the C-suites, almost 40% have liberal arts degrees. It is a great way of thinking done right. It makes you wrestle with those great questions, critically think, synthesize large volumes of information, and make great decisions. And that we've moved away from that, and to the detriment of moving away from that. And I would always say this: if you have a great liberal arts degree and you're humble and you're willing to work hard, you will always, always be wonderfully employed. It's just a fact. And I'll end with one quick story, just to emphasize the value of liberal arts. So you go back to the '60s, and when they had the Apollo mission, and they're trying to get Armstrong and Aldrin on the moon, Apollo 11. So they're there, and in the room. This is the '60s. There's 2 women. It's a very male-dominated engineering, mathematics, science profession in the '60s. And these 2 women in the room. And one woman, everyone credits. They would say, she was the one who was thinking about all these things before we even got to the moon. Then when the lunar craft couldn't get on the moon and all of the alarms were going off, they were about to abort the mission, and they literally say, you know, go get, I think her name was Kate. I always butcher it. Nate will be mad at me. And they go get Kate, and she comes in and she solves it in 2 seconds. Afterwards, they do documentaries, they do all the stuff, and everyone, all the other engineers in the room, all the guys, everyone says it was Kate. And so they say to her, why? You know, she went to University of Michigan, she was a math major. She goes, I belonged in the room, I was a math major, there were science majors, there were engineers, we were all in the room. But those degrees teach you to think linearly. So if something goes wrong, you literally say, okay, what was the first thing we did when we got up in the morning? You know, we took a step to the front door. Did anything go wrong? No. Okay, what was the second thing we did? And they go until we get to where it broke. And then we say, okay, that's what we got to fix. But that was the space program. You just didn't think like that. You couldn't even anticipate what would go on. And you couldn't, you're cramming 3 or, you know, guys into a lunar craft. What, you know, all these things. But anyway, so they said, well, how are you the one to figure it out? What separated you? You were a math major, there was other math majors, engineers, and she goes, I was. But what was little known or wasn't talked about is I was a double major. I was a math and a philosophy major, and I didn't think like anyone else in the room. That is the gift of a liberal arts degree, and that's why they fill C-suites. I joke with University of Florida and USF, I know Karen's here, she does a wonderful job, and she's a great partner right up the road from us. But I joke with some of them when they get in their engineering talks, is like, you know, that's fine, you guys can produce all the engineers you want because the people that graduate from my school are gonna need them as employees. But I just say the value of liberal arts done right is something special. And I'll close with, since I'm in Manatee County, I've only been here 15 months living here as a resident, and I do want to give a shout out to your leadership. You know, I've gotten to know Mike Ron, I've gotten to know Kevin Van Ostenbridge. Those guys have been game changers and great partners for New College. And then on our search committee, I always say he was one of the most brilliant school board members ever because he was on a search committee for New College and he chose me. But Chad Cho has been a great friend. But I just want to thank basically Manatee County. Your leadership has been second to none. So thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
So how do you go about starting to change this back to what we have to get back to? Do you try to do it all at once, or do you start down in the grade schools and work from the bottom up to get it back to what we have to be?
You have to work from I believe you have to work from it's that critical. I think we really are at a critical point. And it's that important that you have to, when I said I would invest everything in those early ages and recognize it's a 20-year thing, it doesn't mean that we don't continue to do all the efforts and what we're doing with our existing population, but I would definitely double and triple down and provide so that when those kids got into their kindergarten readiness scores, also 60% are not kindergarten ready, then becomes 60%, ones and twos in third grade, becomes 60%, ones and twos in 10th grade, 85%, but the scores. And so I think you just have to invest, and if you could get the kindergarten readiness scores at, in kindergarten at 95, 97%, you'll see a massive change. It affects everything. It affects your prison population. It affects how much money you have for environmental, how much tax revenues you get, how many marriages stay together. It affects every aspect of life. And when you continually degrade it and lose ground every single year, you end up slowly but surely in a greater and a greater chaotic environment and an unsafe environment. Yes, sir.
Kevin was next.
Thanks for the shout out. So you're right that there's been a decline in liberal arts education. And I think almost everybody's supportive of what Cho's been doing. Our school is aggressively pushing STEM education programs locally. We're all super supportive of that. But technology is kind of constantly changing education, and now with artificial intelligence coming in, it seems like virtually every job that AI is going to eliminate is going to be a STEM job. If I'm wrong on that, let me know. But I mean, do you see the pendulum swinging back to the liberal arts as a result of that?
And it is. You know, I could send you video after video. The founder of NVIDIA says that coding, you know, a STEM degree, says it's obsolete. Take it out of all your institutions. It'll be done by AI almost exclusively. You take the head of Blackwater Investments is saying, we're now looking for those soft skills. You know, I need somebody who can think, who can analyze and move quickly and adapt, is resilient. That's much more a trait of those kids coming out of a liberal arts environment than a non-liberal arts environment. And all of those guys, Mark Cuban, you can go anyone, right, left, all of the big economics guys, Elon Musk was a liberal arts undergrad. You look at those guys, they're all saying the same thing, that AI is most They always say it's going to replace the dirty jobs, the dull jobs, and the dangerous jobs first. But the next ones are the ones that are those linear jobs where you can put it into a computer and it can punch out linearly an architectural drawing, a bridge, a whatever. And so, yeah, I think that you're seeing a resurgence in the liberal arts. But we have to do it right. October 7th showed us that the liberal arts, for the most part, colleges and universities, are filled with the most indoctrination. And you can't have that. You can't learn. I don't care if it's hard right. I remember when we came to New College, someone said, oh, you're going to replace the hard left. And I'm not calling New College hard left. All you have to do is Google it. Princeton Review, Wall Street Journal, any article, the student newspaper, faculty, presidents, private investigations, and private consulting firms who came in to say, how do we stave off this decline in student enrollment? All before anything happened at New College, all said the same thing. It is a progressively left school with a culture of ugliness. That's undisputed. That being the case, you know, the thought process, okay, we're going to come in and Richard's going to be the president and Ron's going to take it over and it's going to be this far right-wing school. I'm telling you, if you are a far dominated school in the far right or you're a dominated school on the left, the first thing you lose is humility because you have no consequences or adverse thoughts or conflicts. The second thing you do is you lose wisdom. And so I don't care if either one, a great school would have a William F. Buckley on faculty and would have a Gore Vidal. That is a great liberal arts school, and you want your students exposed to that. So we've been inviting people from around the country, hardcore DEI advocates, hardcore DEI non-advocates. We invite everybody from all sides, gender studies advocates, gender studies opponents. We bring them and put them before the stage. As soon as October 7th happened, we had a representative from Palestine and a representative from Israel come and have a civil discourse debate. You can have those debates, they can be civilly, and if they're done right, people will learn from all sides and all walks.
You say the key is kindergarten readiness. We have had Head Start and other programs like that since the 60s. And yet at best, we're no better off than we were back then. What has to change? The old saying of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. What has to change in order to change that kindergarten ready?
It has to be programmatic. The biggest problem of Head Start and all of the programs we have in preschool is that we have allowed, it's the largest choice program we have in the state of Florida, is anybody. It can be at a church, it could be anywhere you want. You can go have a preschool and you can send your kids there. It could be in a home as long as it's all DCF inspected and what have you. What's not forced upon those students is a program. And so I would tell you, I would say 80% of Head Start preschool programs are babysitting. That's not gonna work. We don't need babysitters. I mean, there's a need for them, but what we need is to educate these children, and there needs to be a real programmatic curriculum for those children, and we can incentivize it. We don't even have to say to those people, because they'll all come out of the woodwork and they'll say, oh, you're shutting me down, you're shutting me down. No, here's what we're gonna do. Right now we pay for half a day in Florida. We're gonna pay for a full day, but you only get the full day money if you use this curriculum. We can force that change and make it happen. But the biggest reason, number one, there's a lot, but I'm just saying, number one, overwhelmingly, is we do not have a course curriculum for our early childhood learning.
Yes, sir, in the back.
Yes, I was part of an early literacy program in Pennsylvania, and we coupled it with parenting classes. Is there any thoughts on doing that?
Well, this is what I would say. And it's not me. I mean, you can do Our Kids. He's a liberal Harvard professor. He's written a book on it. The Wright's written books on it. What's the number one, you know, if you were to point back to 1960, I say a lot of great lies exist in the world, but what probably the greatest lie was when Lyndon Johnson said we're going to build a great society. And he took the number of children in minority homes who graduate with two parents in the home at the time they're 18 and going to college. He took it from about 65% down to about 15% in that 40-year span. And all of the data suggest, I say it to my wife, we have 6 kids, and you know, parenting is the most stressful thing you ever do. I don't, you know, we have college kids and little kids. And I always joke with her, having read all these books, right and left, is that if you have 2 parents in the home, you know, and the kids are, you know, graduate from high school and become adults, with 2 parents in the home, the likelihood of success is like 95%. Now, they might, like me, they might not finish their undergraduate degree in 6.5 years as opposed to 4 years. They might push off law school, whatever, I had a good time. But ultimately, I got back to square one. And so I just say it to my wife numerous times when we're stressed about the kids. And I was like, hey, the stats are on our side. The 95%, they're going to be fine. And maybe take them to 23, 24, mostly boys, by the way. Girls, I love them. So I do think that statistically, but that's the thing you'd want. If I could snap my fingers in the world and say, as I would say, every single child is born into a family that has two parents, and they're raised by two parents their whole life. I think that's a game changer. There's nothing you can do to fix that except one thing, and that is educate well. The more educated, the more thoughtful, the more critical they think, and they look at the data, and they look at all of the history, they'll see the value of that. And so, I think that's part of good instruction.
All right, last one, Bob.
Yeah, let's get back to the BPK, which I agree with you that needs to start as early as possible. He spent a number of years in the legislature, a number of years as Commissioner of Education, and yet BPK is not funded below age 4. So what needs to change to take BPK, which is programmatic, down to the 3-year-olds, down to the 2-year-olds, and start having that occur? You support it, you believe it, but it still hasn't happened. So what needs to change to make that happen?
And for full days.
Yeah, it's money and wherewithal. I mean, we're wonderfully represented in this area. My class, when I got elected in 2010, was a great class. Super talented people like Jim Boyd, who represents you now, and he'll be a future Senate president. We also had Matt Gaetz elected in our class. And I say that Matt's a good friend. Matt is a very, very good friend still to this day. He ran against me for speaker. But I always joke, I say, Matt, if you're in a foxhole and all hell's breaking loose, Matt Gaetz is probably the #1 guy I'd want in that foxhole with me, because he's just an amazingly talented guy, and he's amazingly loyal, like no other reason. But I always tell people, just never forget that the reason you're in the foxhole is because of Matt Gaetz. But I say, so I don't care. You can talk to anybody. You can talk to Jim. You can talk to Matt. You can talk to Governor DeSantis. You could talk to, I have said it I'll continue to say it every chance I get, because I just know it's not me. I'm not some brilliant guy. It's just obvious when you look at the data that if we don't fix it, if we don't go down to, if we don't put, what we need is a massive amount of money and that willpower to do it, and the recognition that we have to do it to save our country. We will cease to exist as a constitutional republic in short order. I don't know what that is. I'm not going to be that little girl from Sweden. We'll all die in 12 years. I'm not going to make those kind of predictions, but it's dire. It is absolutely dire. And so, yeah, all of those are things. We talked about going to full day kindergarten, going down to 3rd grade. 70 to 80% of a child's brain is fully developed by age 3. So you got to get there. You got to get down there. 62% of all kids in low-income families don't have a single book in their house and have never even been exposed to a single book in their house. The word deficit between children who are raised with 2 parents and middle class and up versus those who are single parents and below, it's a $10 million word difference by the time they get to age 5. It's just staggering numbers that you have to fix. And I always say there's a civil rights movement in America, and the civil rights movement in America is that it's a statistical fact that most of our poor folks in America, a majority are minority, and a majority of those minority are African American, and they're being robbed of human dignity. They're being robbed of that glorious, the uplifting of the human soul to that glorious light of truth. That is a crisis point, and it's a travesty of justice in this country. Thank you very much.
As tradition with Kiwanis, I want to present you with our golden ruler.
Thank you.
To measure your future success, thanks so much for coming. That was great, man.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Don't forget to vote and turn in your vote to Janine on your way out when you turn your name tag in. They have announced the dates next year for ICON. It'll be in Pittsburgh. We'll hope to see you there. Have a great week, guys.
you.